Yeah, I'm Doug Pearson. I'm the co-founder and CTO at Flowplay. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of how we switched away from Flash. It's an issue that you might have seen in the news. If you haven't been following, Adobe just announced the official end of life of the project, right? 2020, it's all over for Flash. Obviously, it's getting a little over for Flash before that, but we're trying to get out ahead of the curve. So what did we do to get off Flash? And in our case, moving to Haxe, which I'll tell you a bit more about. So, problem we had to solve, right? Oddly enough, the problem is we had a successful game. If we had a failed product, no game, there's no issue for us to solve, right? Back in January 2015, we had a nice, successful game. Biggest World is the main game for us. And part of that problem is it's not just a game on one platform. It runs across many platforms. For us, that means we have an open web version, vegasworld.com. We have a Facebook game. We also run white label versions of our games. So if you go to Microsoft's own casino, you're actually playing Vegas World, but it doesn't say anything about Vegas World. It says Microsoft's own casino, and that's great. We provide Microsoft's casino platform. Then iPad, Android, Kindle, mobile devices, all these different versions of the game. And for us, platforms and cross-platform means a slightly different thing than I think Brandon was just talking about. So we're not talking about porting a game. We're talking about a game that lives across all these platforms all the time. We release continuously across all of these versions. Also, another part of the problem, pretty much made all our revenue. So we're making about $1 million a month off this guy back in January 2015, which for a company which at the time was 35 people, that's a big chunk of money. So that was our whole cash cow. And the real kicker, right, whole thing's in Flash. So we're talking here about 1.4 million lines of action script planning this. It's a huge virtual world. It's not just a simple game. Built over the course of 8 years, not just Vegas World, we built it as a platform, we built a number of other games, other worlds off this same platform. So we've been at this a while. And the other problem with being Flash, it was slow on mobile devices. Some people wouldn't even think it would run on mobile devices. People still tell me that Flash doesn't run on iPad, but it does. But it doesn't run super fast. And we knew, of course, that Flash was going away at some point, right? We didn't know exactly when, back in January of 2015. We just knew one day this thing was going to be gone, and we wanted to be ready for whenever that happened. So, breaking that down a little bit more, what were we really trying to solve? For us, Flash, we were using vector-based art, right? Not bitmap-based art. So that means instructions to draw, take a pen, move up, move across, move down. That's great for a certain style of art. It means we would scale to any resolution. It would look great. We made huge posters. It looked fantastic. But not being bitmap means no support from the GPU, which means on mobile devices in particular, definitely slow to render, not getting 60 frames a second like you'd like to be able to see. So one problem we had to solve. So we mentioned already 8 years of work on this, so an aging code base. We'll build up a fair amount of technical debt. We're a little bit concerned about that. Only a small development team. How do we take this product and get it across and move it to a new platform without bringing across a lot of CRUD that we had built up over 8 years? Also, because we knew this was our real concern as a business, is that the browsers, to us, right, we were very beholden to browser manufacturers. If they just decided to drop Flash support, which they've started to do now, that would be a very serious issue for us as a business running in Flash. It would just put us out of business entirely, potentially overnight. So that was a serious concern. And the real challenge for us is any of this porting work we had to do, we had to essentially swap out this entire car that we had built up over the years whilst it was whizzing down the freeway, right? So we'd take off the tires, replace the engine, put on new doors, replace the windows, do the whole project. But we couldn't just shut down our game and go and work on this project and not continue to maintain it as it went. So that was another one of the serious challenges for us. For us, our player base expects all the time that we're adding new features and new games. It's actually just a virtual world. It's not just an individual game. We need to make monetization improvements. We need to get more revenue out of the engine we had, put in bug fixes, and figure out new partnerships, new devices, and get the platform ported over. So, question then is, right, what do we need? Well, clearly we need a new platform. We're getting off Flash, so what were the properties we needed of the new platform? So, for us, that means one code base, all devices. So not really a porting model, but a cross-platform model. So the idea for us is we expect to have one source code base, one set of assets, and as we make changes to that one code base, that we will just release immediately across all platforms. We don't put out a feature on the web and then port it to iOS and then port it to Android. That's just not the approach we're taking here. We're talking about one solution for all devices. And for us, all devices means web, iPad, iPhone, Android tablets, phones, Kindles, maybe some other stuff in the future, but this is our core today. And we had to have a solution that's a platform that would support a big, complicated code base, right? Over 1 million lines of code. So for us, type safety, a big deal. tech guy, right? So for us, that was an important issue. Not everybody was a big fan of that sort of stuff. It's not always the choices made in the industry, but for us, we saw it as a big issue. Certain other available choices don't bring that along with it, and that makes it hard for a big, complicated code base. So what I'm talking about here, I just want to say too, a little caveat, right? The solution we picked is the solution for everybody, but seems like definitely like the right choice for our kind of business, which is big, complicated games that last a long, long time. So some of the different options, some of the things we looked at, some things we chose not to go with, right? One of the obvious choices is just go HTML5, right? That's a nice solution, right? HTML5 really means JavaScript. But the issue with this, basically, is you wrap it then on, to get into the App Store, right, you do an HTML5 solution, you're wrapping that into some kind of an app on the App Stores. You don't want to be living in the browser on mobile devices. So there's a bunch of companies done that, PhoneGap, Appcelerator, Cordova. Nice model about this is, of course, there's no cross-compilation. You literally are writing JavaScript everywhere. You write once, you run everywhere. It's definitely got, that's a nice model. You're not doing any kind of conversion, anything like that. That's great. But big con, right, is that the slowest performance for that is specifically on the lowest end devices, right? When you're on a mobile platform, you're running in a browser, you're running an interpreted language, you're not by any means as fast as a native solution. So that's a serious, serious drawback. For us also, say the lack of type safety for JavaScript, it's a serious issue. Something Microsoft's going after, trying to add type safety to JavaScript. Facebook certainly gave us a nice nudge saying this is not the right approach because they very publicly dropped the HTML5 solution for their app too. This could be the right answer down the road. I can certainly see if we're having this conversation 5, 10 years from now. It might be that this is the right path, because at some point, mobile devices become fast enough, maybe you don't care, right? That's kind of the story for the web. We went back 10 years. You see the same story for launching stuff on the web. Other options, things like Xamirin. These are platforms that are basically targeting native Android, native iOS, Windows app. That's great, but it kind of defines cross-platform a little differently. In particular, usually for these platforms, there's just no web support at all. They're just not interested in that kind of device. And that, for us, is a complete showstopper. We're making a lot of money off the web. We love the web. We don't see any reason to get away from it. And I have to say, we don't really mind that other people are very much focused on the mobile-first strategy. They can go and pay $10 an install and try and make their business work there. We're happy with having a little less competition out there. More people adopt platforms like this, the less competition we're going to see out on the web. And that's not a bad idea, because mobile's a pretty brutal place to make a business. Certainly, of course, you can succeed, but it's not an easy place to go and make a long-living business. The other big player, of course, in the space, everyone's aware of Unity. That's nice in terms of you get cross-compiled to native, Android, iOS, produce HTML5, lots of other platforms supports, that's great. Strong 3D engine, a lot of content creation tools. C# programming language, C# is a great language, nothing wrong with that. And a huge community, so lots of content, lots of other people solving problems and working out how to do cool stuff with the platform. So why not Unity? So for us, we saw a bunch of serious cons. They're definitely weak on the web. They've done some amazing stuff. I'm not sure if this has changed, but when we last went to look at it, it was, they initially used to be the Unity plugin. That's definitely going away. They come up with a nice solution where they cross-compile from C# into C++, take C++, compile to make JavaScript. Super clever, very advanced tech. Not a fun thing, I think, really to work on the code that comes out of that. So didn't feel like a very good solution. There's sort of this strong version model for Unity where they're releasing new versions across the entire platform. We're a little worried about that too with a long-living game. We have games that have lasted 8 years, still making good revenue. You don't really want to be tied to someone else who's upgrading and stair steps on their platform where they say, well, we fixed this in the next platform, so you now have to go back and upgrade to their platform. It's just not the same as a nice, sort of slowly evolving product. So worried about that. Big deal for us, closed platform. We've been living with Adobe, a closed platform, for a while. We started as closed, getting a little more open. Don't love that relationship. The serious concern with any closed platform is, what if there is a critical bug in the platform that breaks your game that isn't a high priority to the platform maker, right? And if it's, say there's a bug in Unity, maybe only 2 games out of 1,000 are experiencing this, but if it's your 2 games, it's a serious issue. So not a great thing about closed platforms in general. And what if the platform just died out, right? That could happen for a closed platform. It's a lot more likely. People just live through seeing Flash go through that same thing. It seems a little strange to go jumping into that sequence. Also, it's a very heavy kind of platform in the sense of it tries to do everything for you. Does content creation, runtimes, cost compilation, the whole 9 yards. That's great, but from an engineer's perspective, that's a bad design model, right? We're in the business of learning that you don't want to build tightly coupled systems, right? Things that depend all on each other mean that if one part isn't working very well, you're in big trouble. So it's just not good as an engineering design. You really want to be able to mix and match, get the best content creation tool, get the best platform, get the best runtimes, that kind of stuff. So a lot of issues, we just didn't see it happening for Unity. So we looked at this other platform I'm so familiar with, which is Haxe. Haxe is designed, again, to do cross-compile, so it's a language. That's what it really is a language and then some libraries. So it's cross-compiling to native, so native Android OS, H265, and a bunch of other platforms too. It's strongly typed, so that's great, so we like that, since it's good for large, complex systems. There's a big library called OpenFL that helps specifically with porting Flash code. That's designed to make it look very similar to working with ActionScript and Flash. But also, it's open source, so that to us is a huge advantage. Indeed, if you're looking to do this kind of cross-platform work, it seems like you should certainly be considering open source options. If you haven't looked at Haxe, I'd be amazed. Anyway, certainly should be on the list of things to consider. Cons, though, for us, right? At the time we were looking at this, pretty small community, TiVo using it, not a huge lot of other people using it, a little bit concerned about that. Could it even do a game of our size and complexity, right? Would it be that we'd get halfway through this and realize, when you start scaling this out, it just doesn't really work that well. The whole tool chain and documentation, because it's a smaller community, not as well polished, not as clear how to get stuff done. If there's problems, there's less people to ask, how do you work this out? And so, question for us, right? In practice, was this just all a marketing blurb, or was it really up to the job that we needed to be able to do? So, what did we do? Given that, what was our plan? So we broke the problem into two parts. So started one project, which was to rewrite our entire code base to shift over to using bitmap art off vector art. That was actually a huge project, a serious issue, but just still using Flash, which the programming language says, ActionScript. So for us, that was rewriting 1 million lines of code, which we pretty much just had to rewrite 1 million lines of code. Not a small project. At the same time, we started a second project, which was to write a small slots Haxe game just from scratch, right? Give ourselves experience with this. It was using our entire existing back end. We already had a target to build to. We wanted to show, though, that we knew how to actually build this, right? We wanted to prove that the platform did what we needed it to do. Prove that it could generate, one of the targets for Haxe is it can generate Flash Swifts that you load up on just like a regular web page. Show that it could perform on iOS and Android, so that it actually could do HTML5, and we'd get the products and performance we wanted. And for us as a company, get familiar with all the technology, figure out the difficult issues, and make sure we know how to work forward through them. So, project one, rewrite with bitmaps. So that was a change, right? So you can see this is the game as it used to be, this is the game as it is now, on the right. So that's an actual complete redesign of the games. We're going back and revisiting all the art, no reason to make it exactly the same. We tried to streamline the design, make sure that it worked better on mobile devices and tablets than the original game, which had been just designed with the web and Facebook in mind. So also let us go through and rewrite. Those who are tech folks, we moved to a more model view controller architecture on the front end, make a better architectural design, and it was about 900,000 lines of new code, which is a lot of new code. It took us about 18 months to do this. We started off with just a very small team for about the first 9 months, just a few people working on this, getting the base technology down, and then, then we moved up to putting the entire development team, which is about 20 odd people, onto this project, spending about 6 months as a whole team just cranking out all the new content. About 3 months in QA, in August of 2016, we're ready to take this thing live. So not a small project when you start with 1 million lines of code. Second project, building a slots game in Haxe, figures for slots. So this for us was the first time we'd actually specifically targeted handsets. It was an entirely new design, so we had to work out all new design issues, try to work out some of the mobile issues that we were not that experienced on, figure that out, and for us to get a first experience with the whole Haxe tool set. So timeline for this was about 12 months with a pretty small team, about 4 people most of the time, working on and off, not always full time. January 2016, we got this one live on Android and iOS, and then April 2016 we did an HTML5 version, which was actually a Windows app that you can release in the App Store inside Windows PC. So we proved to ourselves that we knew what we were doing in Haxe. So where did we stand after that? So by August of 2016, so now we're about a year ago, the whole rewrite project was done in the sense of it was complete and live. We had a lot of things we wanted to improve, having changed a bunch of the game functionality. There was a lot of polish we wanted to get to, but we hadn't done yet. Project number 2, the Haxe game, also complete, live. We knew from ourselves now, we demonstrated that Haxe was indeed a viable product. So if any of you guys are out there trying to consider it as a product, we've done some of that work for you, improving it to ourselves, that it certainly can work. We knew that we could generate from a single code base directly for Flash, Android, iOS, HTML5, all of that, one code base, it would all work. Native extensions were a significant challenge. That's hooks that you need to put on native platforms. That's still a challenge. Some other issues we'd run into, some issues with the IDEs that weren't as ideal as possible for developing, but we certainly knew how to make it go. But along the way, right, in May of 2016, a big announcement came out. In particular, Chrome announced that they were going to move to what they call Flash disabled by default, which meant, at the time they said in about 6 months, which would be around the end of the year, that they were going to start turning off Flash. You have to click to activate Flash. And we knew that was the beginning of the end for Flash when that announcement came out. The initial proposal they put out was much more serious for us. It was really talking about they were going to whitelist a few companies in the world. Places like Facebook were going to be whitelisted, and Flash was going to continue to run on those sites. Everywhere else, it was going to get turned off. So for a game like ours, it was going to mean that you were going to be in real trouble. Fortunately, they backed off from some of that, got a little bit of pushback, and they went to a slightly less aggressive strategy. But we were very concerned when that announcement. When that announcement came out, we knew then Flash was actually the act of dying. So we need to get off porting. Oops. So sure enough, that meant August 2016. Time to go to the porting business. So at this point, right, we're directly porting this new code base that had been rewritten. So really important here, we were not in the business of making UI changes, art changes, just changing programming languages, changing platforms. So taking ActionScript, converting it all over to Haxe, changing the libraries to use OpenFL. So the goal for us, oddly enough, was to launch this platform still as a Flash game, meaning we now have a Haxe code base and we generate Flash Swifts and put them on a website. After we get all that done, then prove to ourselves that we had it nice and stable, still producing basically the same binaries, then switch over to HTML5. So, major challenges we had to face doing this whole porting work. Really a problem trying to support 3 big code bases all at once, right? So we had an old ActionScript game, we had a new version of ActionScript that we'd built up along the way, and then we were also starting to port the code over. So we actually had 3 games, all of them huge games, all going on simultaneously. With players in the old and the new, we were trying to move players across incrementally, so we had to support the old and the new game and get on with the new porting project to Haxe. We were still continuing to add features, say this rebuilding the cars or driving down the freeway. We were constantly adding new features, and it doesn't mean like small little corner features. We'd be adding entirely new games to this big virtual world, big new features of functionality, and so we needed that to work on all of these different versions of the game, so just a lot of looking back, making sure everything was still functioning, huge effort for QA, making sure that everything was still working correctly as we do these releases. Other challenges, say, big complicated game, right? 900,000 lines of code, even after it was ported over, 900,000 lines you had to get ported. We have about 50 plus slot machines, about a dozen plus table games, 50,000 in-game items, avatars, social features, a complete world. And we're doing this with a social game, which is actually very tricky. There's a problem that we've run into, and we've run into this before, where social games are a hard place to work in because there is actually a complete audience of players who know what you're doing and talk amongst themselves about what it is that's going on, right? So we've had revolts in our player community, which you don't have if you have a completely single-player game. You can't have a revolt because there's no way for them to organize and revolt against you, but we've had revolts. We've had people demanding that we change some of our price points in the games, and we've ultimately had to concede because they managed to organize boycotts. It's a very strange thing to work with. So that's a real challenge when you're working on these changes, is we're doing it in a public space that we can't control. So the players are talking about what we're doing, and we have to make sure we don't piss them all off. Things we did that was right, though. We did a lot of stuff I think that was correct. So an abstract design. So our platform, we made very much a conscious decision to try to abstract away from the actual specifics of the libraries that we were using as much as possible. So like one way to load up a bunch of images called internally, one way to draw images, play animations, do all these important functionality, but not do it spread across 500 places in a big game where there's 500 different ways of doing things. Be just one place. And so we got it wrong as to how we needed that to work on the HTML5 port. There was one place to fix it. We also directly invested right into the Haxe platform. We hired Joshua Granick, sitting over here, who was the lead developer on the Haxe OpenFL library. We also did contract work with Eric Bishton, who was the lead developer on the IntelliJ Haxe plugin. So we directly tried to make sure we could make the platform grow in the directions we thought were important, make sure it continued to progress. Other stuff that we did, I think that was not obvious at the start, and we moved to doing, is we actually used limited sets of tools to help with the porting process, so changing from one programming language to another. There are tools that existed at the time. There's a tool called AS to Haxe. that would try to do a nice conversion of ActionScript code base to Haxe. But we realized it was actually doing too much. It was trying to be very clever. It was trying to solve hard programming problems and look at a bunch of code and rewrite that code for us. And that's great as long as it gets the right answer every time. We realized that's not what you want when you're porting a big complicated game. Like the work is, you want to get it to do the really simple grunt work that you know is guaranteed going to work correctly on the other side. You don't want it to be going through and making changes that might actually introduce subtle bugs that then takes weeks of somebody to realize, where did this bug come from? Why is it showing up? Oh, it's because the porting tool actually misunderstood our code base. So we moved away from a complicated porting tool. We went to a very simple string replace, just patterns, see this, replace it, types, things that were very trivial to fix. That turned out to be a good move. So we actually did less automated and more manual, but all the automated stuff we knew was definitely going to be correct. Another good decision, definitely something I'm very glad we did looking back on it. We rewrote the code base first and then we ported it second, right? We didn't try to do both at the same time, which might have been very tempting, especially if we had known when the end of date for Flash was going to come. That would have been a huge mistake. So we rewrote the game in a language we understood, with tools we knew, understanding exactly what's going on, and then we learned the new platform and ported that over without changing anything about the game. So both problems were sort of manageable. If you try and do both at the same time, you're changing up the game, doing all new designs, all new art, at the same time as trying to work out all new platform. You don't know what you're breaking, you don't know what's going wrong. So that was definitely the right choice. Other things we did, I think, was good choices. I already mentioned this as a crucial thing, but definitely we saw the value of that too, right? The choice of an open source platform, very, very helpful. We'd seen some issues with rendering problems that we could go in and fix. There's a nice example of IPv6 support. So Apple at one point said, hey, to get certification, you have to support IPv6. It wasn't working correctly out of the box for us on our games. So we actually go down and could choose pretty much anywhere in the stack to fix this, right? We could fix it by rewriting all our application layer to use the sockets differently that we were using, or we could go down and find the right point in the libraries and make the changes. The whole stack's open. We could make the fix anywhere we wanted to. And we looked at different choices for how to do that, but it was very empowering to realize it didn't matter that this was broken. It could just be a problem we could solve with a few weeks of work, rather than being stuck. If that had been a problem, and say they were on a closed platform, and there'd been an issue where our game couldn't get certified by Apple because there's something that's broken in the platform, we couldn't change that, that's a horrible place to get yourself into. So very happy about that. And lets us focus in the future as we move on to extending the areas of the platform that matter to us. If there's a part that isn't important, like for us, we're concerned about modular HTML5 loads. We have a big game, we want it to load up really fast. We can work on that problem because it just matters to us. Maybe it doesn't matter to the owner of another platform. So the timeline for the port took about 9 months for us. So again, we started with just a very small team, 1 or 2 people working on this back in September of last year. By February, we expanded out to the whole team again. You can see the same pattern we'd used on our porting from one version of the game to a different version of the game. Then by April, we had a version of Haxe running Flash that went into QA. And now, June of this year, we have HTML5 working. Very little effort to get the HTML5 version working, which is what we'd hoped we'd got to, where just pretty much worked out of the box, a few little tweaks, nothing very serious to deal with. So at this point, as we get to July, we have the Haxe version of Flash ready for release. We haven't released it. Hopefully, in a few weeks here, we'll be able to say, I can put out a slide saying, hey, we did, we've shipped that, and it's done, just about finished. HTML5 version of Haxe is in QA. We hope to have that ready. And then the Haxe Android and iOS release native versions will come out shortly thereafter. So some conclusions from this whole project. So for us, Haxe, definitely looking back, was the right choice. It worked as a platform, and it was the right choice of platform. I feel better and better about the platform the longer we spend time with it, which is good. Not the way I would just say it, I felt about Adobe and Flash. So we have Flash, Android, iOS support for today. That's great. We have HTML5 for what we know we need for tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe WebAssembly becomes the hot thing. Maybe we do desktop apps, Steam apps. Feels like we're ready to take on whatever it is the next piece shows up. Cross-compiling feels like a very strong place to be in. Like that now. The performance looks excellent. We get what we want from speed-wise. We're not tied into a particular platform like we used to be with ActionScript and Flash, where if the market shifts, we're somehow linked into that final target. That's nice not to be in that situation, so we can kind of go wherever it needs to go. And because it's open source, we can even push the development in the directions we want it to go. So that's also feels like a good place to be. The whole Haxe tool set is a lot lighter than a big full platform like Unity. I mentioned that. It's nice. I think that's the right design. I feel like that's actually the correct place from if you're looking at it from a software engineering standpoint. There's less sort of in the platform, and there's more in the libraries. styling, Way3D, libraries that existed in ActionScript exist over in Haxe, and more things can be added and extended to that. This historically has worked better, right? You look at platforms like Java, it's the same model, right? There's Java, a small, simple language, and then on top of it, a whole bunch of libraries. That's done well rather than these complete ecosystems, like Flash certainly has not aged as well. Probably about the same, came into life at about the same time. Like the bigger the ecosystem, the more likely there's something about that will fail. So I think a lighter tool set is a better thing. If you're building a platform a game that you hope will last for a decade, it's good to have a tool set that feels like it can be there. So overall, main conclusion for us is we're still in business. There was a real risk at one point we would not be. We could have been done with this whole little project, but revenues are up 50% from when we started, so we managed to do all this enormous porting project whilst maintaining these different code bases and actually drive up revenue in the meantime. And so now we're at the point where finally we can go off and build some exciting new stuff. So that's very cool for us. Questions?
I guess it wouldn't be a post-mortem without any lessons that you might have learned, any of the maybe one or two things that were not good decisions in this project.
Well, I mean, I'd say certainly the way we initially started the porting, using more automated tools was a bad decision. We started down that path. That was definitely a mistake. Most of the decisions that would have been mistakes were more things that were forced upon us. I would certainly not recommend doing this whilst maintaining a live game. That's a terrible situation to get yourself into. It's not a situation that we could avoid, but it's definitely made it vastly harder. If we could have simply focused all of our attention and efforts on porting over an existing platform that was just static and we didn't have to worry about maintaining an existing live game, that would have made life a lot easier. I don't think we made any huge decisions in the porting process. The actual porting process ended up being simpler than we probably would have expected. I mean, if you look at the time we spent, right, rewriting the game in ActionScript and moving away to bitmap art was a much bigger project for us. It took a lot longer, a lot more resources put into it. When we went to just porting it to Haxe, it turned out that wasn't a huge deal for us. That just wasn't that bad of a project. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not a huge lesson learned, but the lesson was it wasn't as hard as we thought, maybe, the porting side. The rewriting, giant project.
Great, thank you.
I don't have so much a question, more of a request. I would love to hear a panel on the player revolts. You're talking about how your users actually organized themselves?
Did. Yes, we had a full-on, we've had a couple of them where they would organize actual revolts in the community. I mean, and the way how could they leverage us, right? They could boycott buying new content, right? Our revenue stream would just go right off the cliff. If they all get together and agree they're just not buying anything until you make this change, at some point you're like, well, it's kind of like they're paying our salaries, we've got to listen to them. So that's a very strange situation to be in when you're used to building a game where it's like, well, you just ship it and if they're mad, they can't get together. But a social game, if they're mad, they let you know. And we've had problems with that in the past, and we've had other things where they just all get together and it's like, well, most of the time, thankfully, they love us, right? They think it's great, but not all the time.
Awesome. Time for one more.
I noticed that you took two industry leaders, at least from community leaders from the Haxe community,
yes,
on board just to get this project done. And I don't think that's necessarily an opportunity that a lot of other people can take advantage of when developing. So my question is what would you have predicted your length of time for development would have been without that support, that involved support?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, if we hadn't been able to solve that, I mean, to be clear, what we did with both Joshua and Eric was to have them come on board, but still be mostly actually just contributing back to the community. So although they were being paid directly by us, it wasn't just to do in-house work just for our needs. So it was like, we want to make sure that we get the right things fixed on the platform that are important to us, but it was just contribute straight back. But yes, if we'd been more blocked by issues that we'd run into, that could have been much more serious, you're right. I mean, then we would have had to probably go deeper into the platform ourselves and figure out how to work around fixes. So then that porting project might have moved out a little further. Now, of course, now that we've done some of that work, I would say the platform is significantly more mature than when we began. I mean, there's been steady work. I mean, Joshua's been working on this project for many years, and it's a steadily enhancing and improving platform. So it's less of a concern today than it would have been a few years ago, where the platform is still just a little bit more evolving. But it's a fair observation. It's definitely helped to have someone on board who really knows how this stuff works.
Awesome. That's all our time. Thank you so much, Doug Pearson. Big round of applause.